Welcome to Hub 101. So we're going to talk about the flow of class. We're going to do the overview, the mission of the hubs, areas of a hub and the volunteer roles involved, setting up a hub, scenarios. We'll run a couple while we're all in the same room together, this big room, and then we will break you out into breakout rooms and give you more scenarios. So you get to watch us do it, and then you get to practice on your own. So we are all about neighbors helping neighbors. That is what we do. That is our primary goal. Hubs help people with their basic needs. And we really shine the first couple days after a disaster. When the city is saving lives, they're doing search and rescue, they're putting out fires, a lot of really intense things, and they're trying to get their feet underneath them and get some situational awareness. Where are the biggest problems? Where are the people suffering the most? We step into that void and we try and get folks organized and helping one another in their own neighborhoods. So we really do shine in the first 0 to 10 days of a disaster. So you are the help until the help arrives. Why do we have to support one another? Where's the city during all this? Well, there's about 800,000 people that live in Seattle, and we're close to 1 million when we count in the tourists. And there's about 200 first responders. That's firefighters and ambulance personnel on duty at a time. And that doesn't get beefed up before an earthquake because we don't get warning of an earthquake. There's enough folks on duty to handle typical emergencies day to day, but they don't staff for an earthquake, for a large earthquake. They just can't. That's not realistic. A lot of the first responders, whether it's firefighters, EMTs, police department, a lot of folks don't live in the city. So their ability to get into the city to do their job is really hindered because transportation will be so impacted by a large earthquake. We really have to rely on ourselves after a large disaster like an earthquake. This is not unique to Seattle. Seattle isn't doing anything wrong. Every single city out there facing a large disastrous event that gives you no warning like earthquakes, we're all in the same boat. Folks that get hurricanes, they get a little bit of a heads up. We don't have that luxury. We are social creatures. After a disaster, we will naturally gather in open spaces and do what we can to make the situation better. The reason for that is if you're inside during the earthquake, things are falling down. They're falling from the ceiling, they're falling from the walls, big pieces of furniture are tipping over. It's going to feel very frightening to be inside, especially if you start having aftershocks. So we will naturally go outside and we will gather together. People's better natures come to the surface after disasters, not their less desirable instincts. It's one of the things that makes this whole field so fascinating is because you really do get to see the best of people. And we'll gather in parks because they're open to the sky. There's not a lot of telephone wires or trees around. Pea patches are great. Parking lots are fabulous. Just any spot in a neighborhood that is just kind of the natural gathering spot. We will gather there and we will look at each other and we will go, what the heck just happened? And now what do we do? So the hubs take advantage of that natural instinct. On the left is a map of Seattle, and you'll see lots of radio signals on there. There's two different kinds. The ones that with the hollow center are likely a gathering spot. Like you can look at an aerial view of the city, of that neighborhood and go, yeah, I bet people would naturally gather there. Folks will gather where it makes sense. The spots with the solid centers are what we're trying to make folks become, and that's an organized spot. So the neighbors around that neighboring gathering hole are organized. They're starting to think about disasters. They're starting to prepare and think about it, what they can do to help themselves and help their neighbors. So that's where the hubs are in the city. If the group of neighbors has gotten to the point where they're more than just talking about it, they're actually kind of meeting and they're getting jazzed about this and they're starting to learn and they understand the importance of it, then we have a system to help folks get some gear to put into place. The gear is not essential, but it's great to have just because it gives you a jump start on getting organized and helping your neighbors help one another. You will see boxes like this. They're called job boxes. You'll see them all over the city. Most of them are small enough to fit inside of a pickup truck. Some of them are a little bit bigger, but you'll see them everywhere. A lot of them have rakes or sand or parks equipment in them. And some of them are actually hubs. You can't tell the difference because they're not marked for the most part. As you can see, it's open and there is not food and water in there. A lot of folks assume that if we have any kind of equipment or gear stored, that it's going to be food and water for them. And that is not the case. The food and water really needs to come from your own home stores. The guidance is 2 weeks ready. That means having 2 weeks of food, water, medicine, warm clothes, some kind of light source if you need that. All that stuff should be stored in our homes. The hub mission: we gather and share information. We match needs and resources. We manage volunteers because we know volunteers are going to step up. People do it all the time in every disaster. How can I help? Well, it takes a lot of work and a lot of skill to manage those folks so that they're truly useful, so that they stay engaged, feel like they're being put to good use. They're not doing things that actually make things more difficult. So managing volunteers is a big job. And then we educate. We have gathered a lot of really good information and we've printed it out ahead of time and put it in the box because we know that Google isn't going to be working after a disaster, more than likely. So this is the core mission of the hub, and we'll go through each of those. Gather and share information. Most of the hubs have a large map of the city. They also have a smaller map of their own particular neighborhood so that you can mark on there just very visibly what's working, what's not, what hospital's open, what bridge is down. They're especially helpful if the map is really neighborhood specific, very local. And then we also have many, many whiteboards in the hub boxes. And that's to write down information that we have gathered from the community. So where do we get information? Neighbors are going to walk up to us and they're going to go, hey, did you know there was a downed power line? Did you know the gas station was on fire? Did you know there's a collapsed building or folks standing out on the street? They will come and they will tell us that. And that's the information we want. That's the information we put up on those whiteboards so that everybody can figure out what's going on. We will also send volunteers, once we get a little bit more organized, we'll send them out on reconnaissance missions. Hey, you 3 folks, I want you to go to the school. I want you to talk to somebody in charge there, find out how many kids are still there. How are they doing? Is there anything they need? Do they have anything to share? Can we help them? So you send folks on reconnaissance missions. Who in my neighborhood might need a little extra TLC, might need some checking on? Or what resources are around? How are the restaurants near me doing? Also, commercial radio. You can assign somebody to listen to just a radio, Cairo, Como, that kind of radio, just to see if there's anything being broadcast. And if so, let's get it up on a whiteboard so that the entire community can benefit from that information. And then we also have ham radio operators working with us. This is a picture of one of them at one of our drills. They will listen to ham radio waves and they will listen to what the city is broadcasting. They can listen to other hubs talking. So we will also get information if a ham radio operator is sitting with the hub. All that information is consolidated, very, very precise. You need to have good handwriting. You need to be able to print concisely because you don't need lots of words. These boards will fill up very, very fast. So one of the other things you have to do is make sure that this board is up to date. And matching needs and resources, that's the other thing we do. When all that communication is down, how can I get my basic needs met? When I can't drive anywhere, the stores are closed or they're empty, I have to rely on my fellow neighbors. So if one neighbor has a tarp, and another neighbor needs a tarp, we match those 2 folks up. If one family needs diapers and another has diapers to share, we match those up. If one family lost a puppy, another family found a puppy, we match those folks up. If one family has a broken window and another family has an able-bodied neighbor with a ladder who can get up there with some plastic and cover that window to keep the rain out, great. We've just made a match. So that's how we match needs and resources. Our third goal is to organize volunteers, and I talked a little about that. It really is just trying to figure out who do you have in front of you, what skills do they have, and we all have skills, whether it's cooking for a crowd or it's babysitting or it's translating, interpreting. We all have skills, even as to be a runner and pass messages within the hub. We organize volunteers. And the other mission of the hub is to educate. We have pre-printed posters. We've tackled the 5 big topics we think that folks are going to have questions about after a disaster. That's water, hazards, what to do with a downed power line. Food, it's a little bit different treating food in your refrigerator and your freezer if the power is probably not going to come back on for 6 days or something like that. A lot different than we had a storm. I think the power might be out for 6 hours. Very different. So we've captured information about food and how to keep folks safe and healthy. We've talked about communication, and then my favorite is the poster on sanitation and how to handle our human waste if the water pipes and the sewer pipes are broken. So we've gathered that information in posters, and that goes in the information area so we can educate our neighbors. Like I said, we printed out stuff from different websites. This happens to be in Amharic. It looks like sanitation kind of. And then we print out how to handle downed power lines. So again, we've printed all that. It's in a book. It's called the Education book. It's in the hub, and it's there for when we need it, because we can't Google anything after a disaster. Again, the mission of the hub is to gather and share information, match needs and resources, organize the volunteers, and educate. What the hubs are not. We are not a storage place for food and water before a disaster. When you open up a hub box, you're not going to see food and water. We are not a storage place for supplies after a disaster. You will find folks that want to come up and give you things at the hub. You're going to say, that's fabulous that you have stuff for us, but we really need you to keep it at your house. Unless it's something you think you can get rid of in the next hour or so, you don't want the hub area to be littered with tons of gear that you have to think about when it's getting dark and it's starting to rain. Keep people's supplies in their own houses, and we'll send neighbors to them wherever it is they live. And we are also not everything for everyone. I see this a lot when we do drills. Folks get really wrapped up and really excited about helping people, and they spread themselves so thin. Be careful how much you're willing to do for someone. We're really trying to help them be as successful and independent as we can, and have them lean on their neighbors first, and then maybe lean on the hub. Be wary of spending a lot of time and energy and volunteers on a problem that could be solved by neighbors living around that person. And we've got some scenarios that'll make this really clear. Encourage neighbors helping neighbors. So when do the hubs activate? Like I said, if all this was working, if internet was up and you could make phone calls and you could text family and friends and all that, you wouldn't need the hubs. We only stand up when communications are down. When do I help? When do we step in as volunteers? First thing all of us are going to do is we're going to check on those around us. That is our first priority. Whether it's the employees working next to you, folks in your household, the store that you're in, you're going to check on those around you, and you're going to make sure everybody's as safe as they can be and give any first aid if they need it. So you take care of those around you. And then you control your utilities. And then you're going to reach out to family and friends, and you're going to send them a quick text. How are you? Where are you? And what's your plan? And then the time of the text in case it doesn't get delivered right away. And then you're going to check on neighbors. This is assuming you're at home. You're going to check on neighbors. You start knocking on doors. How you doing? Do you need anything? And you start rallying your neighbors. Provide the same kind of stuff. Make sure folks are safe. Make sure they're not hurt terribly. Comfort them if you need to. And then and only then do you grab your hub bag and you walk to the hub. In your hub bag, you want things like a bottle of water, a candy bar, granola bar, something. So food, water, and whatever else you think would make it less miserable. Raincoat, probably, Kleenex. Grab some essentials to make your time at the hub more pleasant and walk to the hub. And so we're looking at 2 to 3 to 6 hours after the disaster. It really depends on how impacted your community is. Right. Hubs are incredibly elegant. This is the definition of elegant. Pleasingly ingenious and simple. The more I'm around this concept, the more respect I have for it. They are taking advantage of our natural instincts. They're low tech. We're not relying on lots of fancy gear. We go down to paper and pencil and whiteboards and thumbtacks. Very, very elegant. They just work really, really well. I see them work really well all the time in drills. Really impressed. Let's talk a little bit more about what's in a hub box. We have some of the hardscape, the canopy, the tables, the bullhorn, the caution tape, posters, whiteboards. We also have a quick start guide. Basically, what are the things you need to do in the first 2 hours? We also have more in-depth job description. Once you're settled into your position and you have a little bit more time to read, you can read. Let's see, I've got the basics down. Now what else could I be doing? We have that Educator book, I was telling you about it. And then we also have lots of forms to capture the information. Again, we've tried to make these as simple and idiot-proof as possible. Okay, so we're going to go on to the areas of the hub, which we talked about already. The mission is to gather and share information. The area of the hub is called the information area. And the person that staffs that function of the hub is the information officer, not rocket science. Match needs and resources. The area is called the resource area. The person responsible for that area is called the resource manager. We need to organize volunteers. We've talked about that. Obviously, the volunteer area is where you do that at, and the person doing that is the volunteer coordinator. We are determined to educate people, so we have an education area, and the person staffing that is the education officer. So there's 4 roles right there. If you have a fully staffed hub, there should be a job for 12 people, a fairly well-defined job for 12 people. Those are the first 4 we talked about. I want to break away from them for just a second and talk about the greeter. I don't know if any of you know, but that's Julie from the Love Boat. Some of the boxes have a combination and multiple people in the neighborhood know it. Some of the boxes have a key and multiple people in the neighborhood have the key. It is not a one-person show. We have created redundancy so that the box can get open. And once the hub is up and running, the greeter is the first person that people would approach. We put this person physically in front of the hub. So it's really obvious that that's where you should start. And that person needs a very welcoming presence. You want to talk to them calmly and listen to what they have to say. If it's a non-urgent issue, you're going to send them to the area that can help them. You want to speak slowly, give them clear, short directions, because like all of us, people will be very, very on edge. It will be very upsetting to everyone involved in an earthquake. So you really want to ratchet down the stress. And that comes with speaking slower and simple words. So if you feel yourself talking too fast, you need to slow it down because you're adding to the stress of the person in front of you. The information officer, this is what they're going to do. You've hit the greeter, and maybe the greeter is going to send you to the information officer. What we need from them is they need to be able to write well. They need to be able to think of what they're going to say before they start writing. There's no rambling on these boards. There's no room for rambling on these boards. We want to make sure that all of this information is still accurate, up to date. That's what the information manager does, is just monitors this information and make sure that it's accurate and that something that came in later doesn't supersede what was written earlier. And then the resource manager. I showed you a couple different ways to organize information. So this is a pantry door, kitchen organizer, or maybe a shoe organizer. The resource manager is helping neighbors find or post things. They're looking for matches between those haves and needs. So if someone has something to give that all of it shouldn't go to one person, like, what's a good example? I have 3 tarps. I'm willing to give them out to 3 different families. If you walk up to the hub, let's say this says, instead of generators and batteries, it says tarps. I see the piece of paper that says somebody has 3 tarps. The resource manager needs to make sure that person doesn't walk away with that piece of paper that says there's 3 tarps out there. They get to walk away with something saying, here's the address, and you get to get 1 tarp. But they need to keep the fact that there's 2 other tarps available. They need to keep that information at the hub. You have to monitor and make sure that multiple use items are used appropriately. Or let's say somebody has a gas-powered chainsaw that they're willing to loan out. That's great. But that piece of paper saying that so-and-so has a gas-powered chainsaw that they're willing to loan out, that paper can't walk away with someone because then no one else can use that resource. That's a system that just has to be monitored. And then keep everything organized and up to date. The volunteer coordinator, again, this person's going to be super busy. They're responsible for organizing work parties. If there's something that needs to be done, the volunteer coordinator would put folks together. And they're going to keep track of who did they send out, when did they send them out, and where did they go to do what. And they never send anybody out alone. We always go in pairs or triplets. You're going to monitor the citizen volunteers, those folks that came up to help. Do they need to be drinking more water? If they need a bathroom break, where can you tell them to go? If they're really tired and stressed, sit down and talk to them and suggest they go home for a while or something. The volunteer coordinator can identify runners for other areas that need to get information moved from one spot to another. Keep the public areas clean and safe. Collect and organize those volunteer forms. And then if the educator has a question they can't answer, maybe one of your volunteers sitting around can help answer that. So you work closely with the educator. And then let's talk about the educator. Again, talk slowly and clearly and keep it very simple. They direct folks to the large posters that I showed you. Provide written directions if possible, and it definitely encourage people to write stuff down because they might not remember it on the walk from the hub back to their home. So encourage folks to take notes. And if there's tough questions, work with the volunteer coordinator or anybody else in the hub to see if you can get that question answered. So those are the 4 roles plus the greeter. So we're up to 5 now. Here's 6 and 7. We have a radio assistant and a radio operator. The radio assistant is the liaison between the radio operator and the hub personnel. The radio folks are going to want to be further away from the hub so that they have a very quiet environment. It's very difficult to listen to a radio and write down verbatim what you're hearing when there's background noise. So they will be further away from the hub than you would expect. So the radio assistant is the person that does that running back and forth. If there's a message that has to go out on radio, they will write it on a special form. It needs to be very, very well written, very legible, and they give it to the radio operator to send out. They also prioritize, if there's more than one message to go out, they prioritize the one that needs to go out first, the most important one. And then they log all messages in and out. And if the radio operator got off the radio, handed the form to the radio assistant logs it, and then they need to figure out, where does this information need to go? Does it need to go to the hub manager? Does it need to go to the information manager? Where does this information need to get spread? So there's a lot of sharing of information in the hubs. And then if the city or some other organization asks the hub for information, the radio assistant is helpful in making sure that that request gets met and that response goes back. So the radio operator, they're going to receive radio messages. They are head down, earbuds on or headphones on or whatever. Their only job is to listen to that radio, which is exhausting, but that's what they're doing. They will document legibly on that special form I talked about, an ICS 213. They will give it to their radio assistant, and then they will send messages out as directed by their assistant. So these two are a really good working pair. The radio operator is just on the radio nonstop, either listening or transmitting. So there's 7 of our roles. The first 4, the greeter we talked about, the radio operator and the radio assistant. And now let's talk about the hub manager. This is the person with the big picture who can stand back, maybe not get mired so much in the details, but stand back and make sure that the whole system was working well. One of their jobs is to assign roles and designate a shift. We're going to work for 4 hours and see how it goes. We're probably going to have to switch out after 4 hours because it's exhausting working in the hub. They're going to stand back and they're going to watch the flow of information and make sure that there's no bottlenecks. Make sure that everybody that needs to know this stuff is getting told. Watch your hub volunteers, those 12 people I talked about, the 12 roles that we have within the hub. Again, you're monitor them for fatigue and just making sure everybody's doing okay. They are ultimately responsible to answer those questions that come from the city or come from other hubs. If there's a big emergency in the hub, that's the person you typically look to for an answer. They may not have it, but they sure can work with other folks around. One of their real goals is to anticipate problems like, wow, we're really getting rained on so much here and things are starting to slide off the boards or whatever. Maybe we need to think about opening up somewhere else tomorrow, that kind of stuff. Are we safe here? And is this a good place to keep working? Another job is the message manager. And this person is a scribe, basically. You're helping neighbors fill out forms. And the reason for that is a lot of folks don't have good handwriting. Or even if they have good handwriting, They're very, very anxious, and this whole situation is very new. They don't understand what's going on. They just want their problem fixed. So they're kind of anxious and a little bit shaky, and you can't read their handwriting. So we have a message manager to help them get that information down legibly and completely. A half-written form doesn't do anybody any good. So you're going to check all the forms for legibility and whether or not it's complete. After the form is filled out, you can send that neighbor and the form to the hub volunteer or whatever area that they need to go to. Okay, last 3 jobs in the hub. These were added on later in the hub's evolution. Medical officer. We don't have medical supplies in the hub box. Most hubs. The hubs are all a little bit different, but most of them do not have medical gear, bandages, or anything in the hub box. There's just not room. But we believe folks in the medical profession will stand up and say, how can I help? And so we do have a role for a medical officer, whether they're helping treat patients in the hub or they're assigned to the closest first aid station. They're going to direct medical volunteers, because not only is some senior kind of person going to step up and go, hey, I got this job, but other folks are going to step up and say, I'm skilled, I have medical skills, what do you want me to do? So somebody needs to send them to where they need to be. Coordinate patient movement and monitor the population for disease outbreak. Are we hearing about lots of people getting sick, which means we probably got some transmission of bugs, that kind of stuff. We also have a visiting nurse, and this person does exactly what you think. They go house to house and they help with care to keep people in their own homes, to keep them safe, to keep them on the road to recovery. You do in-home care, make home visits as needed. Again, you can't do everything. So get your neighbors and anyone else that's willing to help and able to help, get them involved so that your skills can go further and you're more directing and less hands-on care. Write down stuff that you're doing that might be helpful later on. And then again, anticipate needs. If someone is running out of dialysis fluid or insulin or something like that, you can start thinking, how can I help this person? I know they're going to be out in a day and a half. How can I help get them what they need? So you're anticipating needs for them. And then our last one is the reunification officer. We wanted someone to be the point of contact for folks that have lost a person, sometimes a pet, but usually a person. Having to tell your story to a different person every single time you check back with the hub can be very stressful. So the reunification officer should know about your situation. And the reunification officer, if it's appropriate, could work with the volunteer coordinator and get a search party together. Again, no one goes out alone, but that may be something we might be able to help get family members and friends back together. These are the 12 roles we're going to ask you guys to choose once you get into your breakout rooms. Miscellaneous info. This is a form that's been developed over time. Most of the hubs have this or have a version of this. If you were filling it out, if you were the message manager or a neighbor, you would circle, I have 2 T diapers. Those are toddlers for those of you that aren't familiar with diapers. I have 3 boxes of 2 T diapers. They happen to be the Huggies brand to give. They are unopened. I will leave them on the front porch. My name is Terry Lopez. Here's my address. When will you return? Not going to return unless the diapers haven't left my front porch in 3 days. And this is when I visited the hub. So that's just a sample of how you would fill this out. Here's another form we use. This is volunteer information. The volunteer coordinator could hand this to anybody stepping up that said, I don't have any skills, but what can I do? Well, you have lots of skills you just haven't even thought about. So we've captured some of them on here just to make people think. And we want them to fill this out. Availability is really good. Like, I can't stay here at the hub, but I'm going to go home and I'll be available from 2 to 8 every single day. So the availability is really crucial to know. It's nice to know that you have somebody that will provide childcare or that's good at childcare, but it doesn't help if you don't know how to get hold of them and what their plans are. So that's another form. This is it's kind of hard to see, sorry about that. This is a formal form that comes from FEMA. It's called the ICS 213. If you get involved with hubs, you'll hear a lot about that. It's just how we communicate via the radio. Here's another tool that was developed for the hubs. Debbie Whitmer, that works for Seattle, she helped us develop this. So this is laminated. This is one side of it. Here's lots of different languages. I speak this language. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Here's a picture of a body, so you can mark on there what hurts, a clock. I'll show you the other side. Lots of pictures. So we developed this to help folks that don't speak English or that don't speak at all, help them tell us what's going on. So this is a really useful tool that all the hubs have. This is a quick start guide. I'm not going to go into it, but it's just, again, it's another thing that's been developed to make this whole system as simple as possible.
So the question is, should I have been in on this? Is this just for hub managers? This is for everyone, because your hub manager might not show up. And Ann and I have just taught the same class to 4 classes of 9th graders, and we make the same point. In a disaster, people will show up, and even if nobody's trained, they'll start trying to figure it out. That you are in this class gives you some insight about things to think about and ways to organize response, even if nobody else who's been through training shows up. You know, it's about getting information out. It's about matching people. And everything that Ann talked about is in books in the hub boxes. So we want everybody to absorb how a hub works, because then the more people can make it work more smoothly.
And now we'll go through the flow of information through the hub. Here's your greeter. We talked about that. Again, you're going to place them at the front of wherever your hub is to make them really obvious that that's the person you need to talk to first. And so let's say the first person that walks up says, I have information. I think the community would want to know about this. And that's what they're telling the greeter. So the greeter sends them to the message taker. This person helps them put that information on a form, and then they go over to the information organizer. If it's information everybody should know, like the gas station isn't working, they put it on the whiteboard and they post it for the whole community to know about. If the folks that approach the greeter next have something to give or need something, the greeter again talks to them, figures out what's going on, sends them to the message taker, and then they go to the resource manager. And they either put their paperwork up there or they look around to see if there's a match and what they needed is up there already. Also, the greeter can send neighbors straight to the educator if they have a question that the educator probably would be able to answer, or straight to the volunteer coordinator. I don't have any needs. I don't have anything to give right now, but I have my time. I'm here to volunteer. It goes straight to the volunteer coordinator. And then if it's a high priority and the greeter thinks that it's really urgent, then they work with the hub manager, the radio message manager, who would, if appropriate, would put it on a form, the ICS 213, give it to the radio operator, and maybe it goes out to another hub or to the city. This path is subject to conditions. That's kind of how it all flows. Couple more things I want to talk about. Before every shift, either the hub manager, sometimes the volunteer coordinator, needs to do some kind of a safety briefing. And really all you're trying to tell people is to slow down. We're going to do the best we can do. We're not going to do it perfectly, but perfection is not the goal. Helping our neighbors is the goal. You encourage people to speak up. If they see something, say something. If there's a trip hazard, bring it to someone's attention. Let's keep people from getting hurt. Let's talk real quick about changing shifts. If you're going off, you want to find the person that's replacing you as soon as you can, and you start talking to them about, this is what I've been doing, and showing them the forms. And you're just going to break them in. You're going to give them some OJT so that when you step away from the hub, your replacement is aware of what's going on and feels fairly comfortable. The books are good. OJT training is really, really good. We haven't talked about how to get a box in the first place. Reach out to us. Cindy and I help with that kind of hub development.
Ann and I do the kind of, we call it, the orientation and mentoring new hubs. And so those of you who are in new hubs like Phil, we just let you get your feet under you. And then we say, okay, we're ready. You're ready to move. And here's like maybe the first 3 things you can consider doing and stuff like that.
I'm going to go through some scenarios so that you guys get a sense of what this is going to be like when you get into your breakout rooms. Number 1, somebody walks up to the greeter and says, I'm a midwife, but I can't get into work. Can you use my skills? If you were the greeter, where would you send this person?
Volunteer.
Volunteer coordinator. Yeah, perfect. My tap water is a weird brown color. Is it safe to drink?
Educator.
Yeah, more likely the educator. But a lot of these have two answers. So Phil, you're not wrong. I want to report that there is a downed power line in the post office parking lot. I don't know if it's carrying electricity or not.
Information manager.
Information manager. You want the entire community to know that that's going on. What else could you maybe do with that information or with that situation?
Go to the educator and see what you do with the downed power line.
Sure, that's a great one. Yeah, find out what to do. And then maybe go to the volunteer coordinator, or maybe the information person goes to the volunteer coordinator and goes, hey, I just found out there's a downed power line in the parking lot. Do you have any extra bodies that can go and cordon off that area, keep people from, accidentally walking across it and getting electrocuted? Until we know what to do with it, let's keep folks away from it. So there's a lot of interaction between hub volunteers. I want to report a large fire at the gas station. The 4-story senior housing building next to it looks like it's going to catch fire any minute. Help.
Volunteer coordinator.
Yeah. Is there anybody that can help make sure people are evacuated out of that building? Maybe fight a fire. Not sure about that one, but definitely make sure folks are safe.
Radio communications.
Yeah, maybe this is something that rises to the level of sending it to the fire department. So you get it to the radio folks. All right, so we're going to put you into your breakout rooms in just a second. I'm going to post the list of jobs, the 12 roles, do a little introduction of who you all are, and then choose your roles.